Our Turkey analyst, Yusuf Erim, is here. Yusuf, so we've got Ube's piece there looking at the relationship between Washington and Riyadh, and right in the middle of it, geographically as well as politically, as far as this story is concerned, is Ankara. What about the pressures on Ankara from those two countries?
Well, the Turkey-Saudi relationship has deteriorated since the Arab Spring. There's been a de facto Cold War between Riyadh and Ankara, and frankly, they've been on opposite sides of major issues concerning the Middle East, everything from the war in Yemen to the GCC blockade of Qatar to support for the YPG and Assad in Syria. So Turkey has been on opposite sides with Riyadh. There's been cold winds, a cold breeze between Riyadh and Ankara, and frankly, the government, the Turkish government, is getting very, very tired and impatient with Mohammed bin Salman's machinations, and they want Saudi to come clean on this Khashoggi issue.
And so far, there's been a certain amount of frustration, presumably, from the Saudi investigation team, you know, always having to wait continually for permission to scientifically analyze all these different sites that they want to look at, the latest being that black Mercedes in that Istanbul parking lot. But do you think the strategy, is it even a strategy, of these unnamed sources, unofficial sources, continually leaking information from the Turkish investigation team, is a strategy, or are people speaking off the record without permission? Is it something being used to pressure Riyadh into cooperating more? What's going on with all of that? Because the amount of unnamed sources that have been reported on this story for 3 weeks is unlike anything I've seen before.
There's a reason for that. If you've noticed, President Erdogan, who's normally very vocal and very direct, has been very patient during this investigation. He has not tried to directly blame Saudi Arabia too much, directly blame the Crown Prince, and he's let the facts do the talking and the evidence do the talking rather than create a diplomatic crisis with a strong vocal stance. He's let the Congress and Senate in the United States do the talking. He's let Germany, Britain, and France do the talking because the facts speak for themselves. The evidence speaks for itself. And he doesn't have to be vocal because he has concrete evidence in his hand showing this was a murder inside the consulate. He has the evidence linking this to the royal court in Riyadh. And hence, he can be very comfortable. Now, the amount of unnamed officials, is it a strategy? Is it just human nature, people wanting to leak a hot story? I think it's a little of both. It's a little of human nature, people wanting to get that hot news out and to journalists, and it's also a little bit of strategy because, like I said, they don't want to directly engage Saudi Arabia. They don't want to be the ones to unilaterally sanction Saudi Arabia. President Erdogan would like this to be a multilateral decision reached by the international community together.
And then there's supposed to be the audio of what happened to Jamal Khashoggi on the 2nd of October, the interrogation, the torture, the dismembering of the body. And Donald Trump says he wants to hear that recording. Gina Haspel, the CIA director, is in Ankara. Mike Pompeo was here a few days ago, the US Secretary of State. What is Erdogan possibly saying to them, and what are they saying to Erdogan in the way this information is coming out? Because if you say, and it's been reported, that Erdogan has all of this concrete evidence, why is he not making it public? Could he possibly have been playing it to Mike Pompeo? Will he play it to Gina Haspel?
Well, if it's been reported, it hasn't been confirmed that it exists. If it does exist, I highly doubt more than a handful of top Turkish officials and intelligence officers have heard that audio cassette. It is probably very confidential because it would be a critical part of the investigation. Let's not forget, this is a murder investigation. This isn't a TV show, a murder TV show, a CSI show or something like that. Everyone who wants to listen to the cassette can't just fly into Ankara and say, hey, play it for me. There's a serious murder investigation going on right now, and it has to be directed in a confidential way, just as any murder investigation would go if it wasn't Jamal Khashoggi, but X person or Y person.
Look, what are we expecting from Erdogan? He had promised that he would tell some truths that were previously unheard in terms of the Turkish investigation. Are we expecting him to actually point the finger finally at Riyadh? Because as you rightly say, so far, 3 weeks after the event, Ankara has still not at all, even once, directly blamed the government or the leadership in Riyadh?
Now, the one thing I don't expect today is any leaks, anything sensational. I expect President Erdogan to stick to the facts and concrete evidence that he has. I expect him to detail a chronological order of what happened beginning with October 2nd or maybe beforehand to today. And a very detailed statement that will most likely, without directly finger pointing, lead the evidence towards Riyadh to the royal court. This is what I'm expecting, but I don't think there will be anything sensational to take away from the facts or cloud the audience's mind.
How is this playing with the people who voted for Erdogan in terms of, do they believe that he's managing, as you say, a murder investigation of a foreign national who wanted to marry a Turkish national in Istanbul, albeit on sovereign territory of another nation? But do they believe that he's going about this the right way, or would they like to see him be harder and say this can't be allowed to happen in Turkey? While he said that, he hasn't yet played as hardball as he possibly can.
I think domestically he has a lot of, the stance he's taken is receiving a lot of support domestically. Now, let's not forget Jamal Khashoggi, his Turkish name, Cemil Khashoggi. He comes from a Turkish lineage as well, an Ottoman lineage. So the public has greatly embraced him as one of us, one of ours was murdered. That's the way the Turkish public views it. And they've greatly embraced this, and it's captured the imagination of the public. And defending one of us, not that it would be different if it was someone else, the murder investigation would still adhere to very strict guidelines. But when it's one of us, the public has, like I said, embraced this more. And they feel that President Erdogan is doing a very good job letting the facts speak for itself. If we've noticed, very few politicians have commented on this topic. And I think that's a huge bonus of letting unnamed officials, letting the police, letting the prosecutor talk, letting the evidence talk. And as long as this doesn't get clouded with diplomacy and clouded with political agendas, this investigation can be led very transparently and satisfy the international community.
What have you heard about the Saudi investigation team that's supposed to be here conducting a joint investigation? Because all the lines coming out of this investigation are being given by the Turkish side. What have you heard about the Saudi involvement in this joint investigation?
The Saudi involvement so far, all they're doing is basically reporting back to the royal court and letting them know what the Turkish team is doing down here so far. Because as the Turkish team is, the meetings between the Turks and the Saudis on the joint team was basically to establish the guidelines of how this investigation was going to be conducted. What are the generally accepted practices for investigation in Saudi? What are the generally accepted practices for investigation in Turkey? And they tried to form a framework of saying, okay, this is acceptable on both sides, this is not acceptable. So that was the main function of that joint team, of one of the reasons why the Saudis were here. And as for real investigative work, they have not really taken part in any of the real investigations where they're taking samples and whatnot. They're receiving most of that from the Turks.
Okay, Yusuf, thank you very much. Yusuf Erim, our Turkey analyst.